and Mitch McConnell and others were really on the fence about what they were going to do. When that decision got made that Donald Trump had won in a sense, that Trump he was on the ropes, but he'd reclaimed enough power over the party that they needed to capitulate to him. So you saw McConnell vote against impeachment, but give a big, loud, meaningless speech on the Senate floor. I think McConnell at that point joined the crowd that said it's important for our politics going forward at the macro level is to try to memory hold January 6th. That is now the fundamental kind of macro meta political objective of the entire Republican Party. And that 74% is a sign that so far, the way that Republicans are handling this with their voters, which is really what they're focused on right now, maybe wrongly, and you and I could talk about whether that's the right strategic objective, but that is what Republicans are focused on. How do we get as much of the country as possible, and particularly in our party, to memory hold January 6th, to treat that event like it was meaningless? We don't want it to be thought of as 9/11. And I think the politics of this now are, you were talking before about a select committee and how there's going to be media coverage. If Democrats run a partisan process here, or the way Republicans ran the Benghazi process, it's not like the media is going to go away. And there's going to be tons of coverage of it. We're going to get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th. But I think from McConnell's standpoint and McCarthy's standpoint, there's a higher likelihood of being able to tar that process, or attempt, and in their minds, to tar that process as partisan, that if they're looking at two options, one of which is a blessed, Republican-sanctified investigation whose results they will have to then stand by, they see no good politics coming out of that. If they see a Democratic process that they can attack, they see a slight measure of advantage in being able to attack that process, and that in that small measure help them with the larger objective, which is to keep trying to memory hole and recontextualize January 6th, particularly among their voters, but then as much as possible in the middle of the electorate to downplay and dismiss and try to minimize the significance of what happened on what I think we all here agree is one of the most horrible and continuingly problematic events in modern American history.
And of course, I believe that. You just said it. You believe it. Ron Johnson believes this was much ado about nothing, said it was a bunch of peaceful protesters. Donald Trump tried to tell Kevin McCarthy that it was no more than Antifa rioters. McCarthy yelled at him, swore, said that wasn't the truth. Donnie Deutsch, though, given what John said, and it makes a lot of sense that they do want to memory hold this. They want to pretend it never happened. They want to downplay it. We've got the tapes.
They were there.
We've got the receipts. We've got Kevin McCarthy on the floor of the House blaming Donald Trump for this. We have Mitch McConnell blaming Donald Trump for this. We have Republicans that were chastened by this when it happened. We've got all the receipts, and those videos, those clips are forever. This is one of the things I really do believe they're being too clever by half, because this is one of those things. We've got the receipts. We all know what happened. They can try to lie all they want to lie, or the Ron Johnson way, but they're not going to be able to run away from this. And it just seems to me. But talk about this in terms of branding. I'm sure you've had examples of corporations that you've worked with that have wanted to ignore a big problem, that have wanted to pretend it didn't happen. And you've had to say to them, listen, you just got to face this head on. And it seems to me, again, just forget about the Democrats, forget about everything else. Just for the good of the Republican Party, this seems like something they need to face head on so they can move forward. I think Liz Cheney is so right. I think Adam Kinzinger is so right. They need to face it. Like Murkowski is right. Romney is right. They need to face it straight on, get the truth out, and put it behind them.
Joe, they actually need to do what you've been doing on the show a little bit in saying that they almost have to admit that their party is divided and saying, you know what, we are the Republicans. There's this real extreme fringe out there that are the insurrectionists. But the irony is, when you look at the Quinnipiac poll and that 74% say, it's time, no big deal here, let's move on, that as a branding guy, I go, no, the Republican Party is the insurrectionist party. And that the tapes prove it and the visuals lead on. So, as a marketing guy, it's going forward. All I need are those images. We are a world that is more visual than audio. And we think about the atrocities of the Vietnam War. It's that little girl naked running down with the napalm in the back. Or you think about 9/11, you see the buildings burning. This is what stays with us. This is what stays in our gut. And I'm going to go back to, once again, they have to separate the very thing that you've been touting, that there are two parties there. They actually have to need to say, you know what, the insurrectionist is not the Republican Party, where in reality, the Quinnipiac poll shows it actually is the Republican Party. So that's the quagmire that they're in.
You know, it's interesting. You talk about those images from Vietnam, the images from 9/11. I remember after 9/11, people said, stop showing the planes going into the Twin Towers. And we got very strict guidance not to show those clips except under extraordinary circumstances. A lot of conservatives complained about that. I complained about it, too. I wanted Americans to see the face of evil. I wanted them to see what the Islamic terrorists had done to us. I wanted to call that terrorism by its name. I wanted there to be a constant visual representation of that, because we had to stare face to face into the eyes of the evil that did that to us, right? On 9/11. And that was what Republicans believe. That's what conservatives believe. I said last hour, we see that chaos, the sort that we saw around the Capitol, the sort that, yes, is, as many Republicans said during the campaign, that we saw last summer, looting in Los Angeles. I remember watching police cars being glass being shattered during not the Black Lives Matter protests, during things to the side of that, where spun off of those protests, there were people, it was used for excuses for rioting, for looting, all that. I was enraged watching that. I was enraged watching what happened in Portland, just enraged by it. I still can't understand why those people in Portland didn't take control of their streets. Now, most of you will disagree with me on this, and I understand that. Probably mad. What I'm trying to make you see is how a conservative thinks. And that's how I think. And that's how conservatives have always thought. So the big question is, of course, you should know what I'm saying next. You should see it coming out of the tunnel, as Professor Pearson said in my first torts class at University of Florida. You should see this coming at you like a freight train rolling out of the mist. So the question is, if that's how we conservatives are wired, then why is it that they want to avert their eyes from police officers being abused by American flags? Why do they want to avert their eyes from rioters and insurrectionists breaching the United States Capitol, the heartbeat of American democracy, the center, the epicenter of freedom across the globe? Why do they want to pretend that this never happened? Look at that. Ron Johnson, he doesn't want you to remember this happens. He wants you to remember Kenosha. And yeah, you should remember Kenosha. But he doesn't want you to remember when the center of American freedom was attacked, when police officers were brutalized. He wants you to remember the looting at a Saks Fifth Avenue in Minneapolis. Again, something that, as a conservative, I saw in the middle of summer, and I said, what the hell is going on? Why aren't these people being arrested? And again, I say that just so you can get into the mind of how a conservative thinks when he sees rioting and looting on either side. So why is it the Republicans, they want you to see the looting and the rioting from this past summer? They want you to see the planes going into the Twin Towers. They want you to see the face of evil. I do. You need to see the face of evil. And this is evil. What you're watching right now, this is evil. This is evil. These are people trying to undermine American democracy. These are people that, if you look at the statute, if you look at the statute for sedition, this fits the very definition of sedition. But for some reason, these so-called conservatives, they want you to forget about this. As John Heilemann said, they want you to put this in a memory hole. We can't do it. Sorry, we can't do it. We love America. And we conservatives can't do it. We true conservatives.
Republicans.
Those of us who are actually people that learned from Margaret Thatcher and learned from Ronald Reagan and actually grew up reading conservative books and believing what Russell Kirk said. We can't avert our eyes from this.
No.
And if you can, my friend, you are not conservative.